in just a few short weeks, one of the world's largest exercises in democracy will take place. It's elections for European Parliament. Hundreds of millions of voters from 28 member states will cast ballots. Now, many of them may go to far-right parties for the first time. We're crossing over now to our partners at DW to learn a bit more about this massive exercise.
In just a few short weeks, one of the world's largest exercises in democracy will be taking place. It's elections for European Parliament. Hundreds of millions of voters from 28 member states will cast ballots. Many of them will go to far-right parties for the first time. That's the expectation of some pundits. Now, for more on how that may shape EU policy and its relations with its neighbors, we've been joined by correspondent from our partners DW in Berlin, Mr. Glucroft. Now, welcome, William. Thanks for joining us. Why might there be a far-right surge, and how are things looking for the far-right parties running in the elections?
Good morning to you. Right. Well, let's take a big step back here. Sometimes European politics is seen as boring, very procedural, not much happens, moves very slowly. But actually, a lot has happened on the European political scale since the last European parliamentary elections in 2014. You'll remember that in 2014, Brexit hadn't happened yet. Hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees from parts of Africa and the Middle East had not yet come to the European Union's borders. There hadn't yet been a wave of terrorist attacks in the EU. So a lot of these things that have upset European politics and moved things further to the right had not yet happened yet, and far-right parties at the time didn't yet have the political control that they now have in the intervening years since. In the intervening years since, you've seen now governments in Poland and Hungary and Italy now being controlled by far-right Eurosceptic parties. In Germany, the third largest party in the current national parliament, the Bundestag, is a far-right populist party. So all of this coming together forms a foundation at the national level of the various EU member states to make a big push at the European level in these European elections coming up in a few weeks. And if polls are true, all of these various right-wing, far-right, Eurosceptic parties could walk away with as much as a third of the 700-plus seats in European Parliament. So it's no small number that we're talking about here.
I see a lot of reference to Brexit and its effects. What role does Brexit play?
Yeah, Brexit's the big wild card because no one was really expecting for the UK to still be in the EU by the time it came to European elections. The UK should have been out of the EU in March of this year because of the Brexit referendum. They should not be running candidates in the European elections, and yet here they are because the UK Parliament wasn't able to come up with a plan on how to exactly get out of the EU. So they're still in the EU. They're legally obligated to run and be part of European elections, which means that the UK might be sending a lot more Eurosceptic and anti-EU voices to Brussels, to the European Parliament, than otherwise would have been expected. Nigel Farage is perhaps the loudest voice among them, has a long track record of picking apart the EU, really doesn't like the EU. He started a new party called the Brexit Party. It's right there in the name what they stand for. And as soon as he founded that party just a few short weeks ago, it shot to the top of the polls in the UK. And Nigel Farage is on record for really wanting to take apart the EU and especially getting the UK out of the EU, and he might find a lot more friendly faces to make that happen when he goes back to Brussels after these elections at the end of May.
Right, thank you very much, William, for that update.